There we go.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming out to the noon meeting. My name is Nabila, and I'm the co-chair of the Tech Committee. And today we have Siwe Toto. He is an occupational therapist and a senior lecturer within the Division of Public Health Medicine. And today he's going to be doing a topic on UCT's language policy. That's all yours, Siwe. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Nabila. And good afternoon, everybody. Very happy to be here. 3 reasons. I had counted 2 last night when I was thinking about today, but actually it's now 3 reasons. So I'll start with the one that just is emergent. The number of people is really good for me because it's less questions, less intimidating. And the second reason why I'm happy to be here is connected to the first one about this feeling overwhelmed or anxious or panic-stricken, is that today was actually quite, as I was planning today's presentation, I'm pretty sure I lost about 2, maybe 3 kilograms. So it was also good. So I can now fit into some of my pants without them being a little too tight. So then the third reason is that I think it's high time we do look at matters of language, because language is central to how we express ourselves, our very being. We express our emotions through language. We formulate ideas through language. We teach and train and assess through language, and we communicate, obviously, through language. And language is multifaceted. It comes in various forms, such as sign language, where it's not necessarily spoken word as we have traditionally understood languages. And it is sometimes nuanced. For example, I convene professionalism, and we introduce students to the idea of professionalism early on. But if we are being very honest, professionalism is or can be synthesized in philosophical concepts such as being, becoming, belonging, and doing. Now, these terms, when you try to translate them into my language, for example, an African language is Xhosa, they become even far more nuanced. So maybe I'll use just one such word, maybe 2 if I have time. The first one is professionalism is related to isidima, right? To have dignity, to treat people with dignity, but also to be accorded dignity, right? So isidima in isiXhosa relates to notions of personal respect, and inherent dignity, communal respect, and it is something that is earned in relation with others. Whereas in English, as I understand English, and English, though I have fluency in it, I'm not a native speaker of it. So some things are a little removed from me. So if somebody says, when, for example, I was introduced to dignity conserving care as one of the themes that we teach students in my course, it didn't click to me that we're saying that when you are practicing, you should be upholding someone's isidima, because dignity to me was just this word that we use, which didn't really have much meaning because the language was not mine. So the language policy is developed in that context. So there's a beautiful quote by Archbishop Desmond Tutu that says, language is very powerful. Language does not just describe reality. Instead, it creates the reality it describes. So what we have access to or exposure to can either limit our possibilities or push us beyond. And that is sometimes because of language, right? So I have a personal anecdote. When I first shared this, it was at the faculty board. So, Leslie, you were there. So it's a repeat story for you. But the point still sticks nonetheless. So I came to UCT in 2010 from Eastern Cape in Transkei, or the old Transkei. Now, in Transkei, when we travel, when you don't have a car between towns, we do what we call hiking. So every end of the month, my mother and I would go shopping or to pay her bills and everything in Umtata. So we'd stand, there's a place called the hiking spot in Mount Frey, and then you write on a little placard XA, which means you're going to Umtata to the traffic the road users there, right? Someone will stop and then you get a lift. We call that hiking. And when you get back again home, it's XK to go back to Mount Frey, or XE and Nobo. So all the towns in Eastern Cape have those codes, right? So now I'm here at UCT and I've made some friends. It's a multiracial group and everything. And it's not my first time having multiracial friends, but it's just they're now overwhelmingly the majority. And then someone says a couple of weeks into first year, let's go hiking. So I'm like, why would we go hiking in Cape Town? So hence that little emoji there, because it's like, hey, I don't know. And anyway, but I don't say that I don't know. I just say, yeah, no, we can go hiking. So the day comes and I get dressed up, as you see. I'm dressed because, and I thought, so I put things that were slightly smart casual because I wasn't sure after the hiking what's going to happen. Maybe we're hiking to another town, maybe we're going to eat at a restaurant. I don't know. So I dressed up for the hiking that I understood to mean. When I get to where we're all meant to meet at the Jamie stop, everyone else is in athletic wear. I'm like, in my head, yo, these people don't know how to dress. How can you dress like this going to hiking? And then they actually verbalize my internal monologue and say, why are you dressed like this? Dress so fancy to hike. I'm like, yes, we're going hiking. What do you mean? Only to discover what they meant was actually going up a mountain, and I was dressed like this. You see, I'm wearing boots, leather boots, and I thought we were going for a nice. Yes, it's actually funny that I've become now an avid hiker, and I dress nothing like this, like I did when I first started. But the point is about context. Words have meaning in context. So where I came from, this activity of going up a mountain, it's not a thing. People go up the mountain for something else, not just as a walk in and of itself. So I was quite shocked when I came to Cape Town and people just want to walk. In Eastern Cape, we don't have enough cars. What do you mean you want to walk when you've got cars? No one, you know? So I reflected on this moment because we have students, we have staff members who come from very different contexts. If you think about staff members from rural parts of Africa, who something for us that we might take for granted, like meeting up for coffee, might be to them very, very different or have different connotations. Just as students who might have very different understandings of all the jargon that we use when we start teaching them. So that's why we should start looking at language much more deeply than we do. Now, the other thing, I don't know if I should play the video first or say this. Let me first say it and then I'll play the video. So in thinking about today, I was trying to come up with a different sort of focus on the language policy because it's so broad. You can zone in on specific themes, but I realized actually more of an overview that I must give. But when I was trying to figure it out, I noticed something within myself. This phenomenon that I think, I read, and I speak faster in English than isiXhosa. And isiXhosa, I have native fluency. This is my mother tongue. And so I started feeling a little uncomfortable about that, particularly given that English is a very static language. It uses nouns and objects to describe reality. Whereas African languages, Nguni languages in particular, like isiXhosa, are process-oriented languages. So they describe relationships between phenomena. They describe processes rather than nouns. So it's verb-centric. So you would think it's faster, but actually, even when I read isiXhosa, I'm still understanding what I'm reading, but I have to take my time. And this is why when I text on WhatsApp, I prefer to reply in English. But this gave me a sense of discomfort, because why is it that I am privileging, so to speak, English over my own native language? But and this is a layered question, obviously. So when I started thinking about it and doing a little bit of research, I found something very interesting. This question touches on neurolinguistics. It touches on coloniality. It also touches on the structure of thought itself. Firstly, in terms of neurolinguistics, we know that when you are doing things, in particular, thinking or like being in academia, doing the work of academia, there are neural pathways that keep getting fired up over and over time. And so it becomes easier to access linguistic tools, concepts, and you can make things abstract and concrete very easily. And because we speak English almost all the time, it becomes easier and easier and easier. So those neural pathways actually become, what's the word, established. Whereas isiXhosa, I don't actually, am not in an environment or a context where I speak about abstract terms or academic conversations entirely in my mother tongue. And so those neural pathways are either underdeveloped or just not there. And this is a function of coloniality. And coloniality, of course, is the legacy of apartheid and colonialism. So in how we now understand and see and perceive and move in the world is entirely on the blueprint of colonialism, even in the way that we think. So there's this short video that I want to show you that we've played for students as well, just to, so I just want to check if, Carmen, if you could tell me if you can see on your team's that side. I don't know if you can see what I'm about to play.
Sorry, Siwe.
Can you see my screen?
I see the screen policy background is the slide.
No, okay. Let me share and unshare one more time. Hey? Oh, it's no. You can't see what I can see. That's what's happening. And I want you to see what I'm seeing. So let me just give me a second as I change the settings, because it will make sense. You know what? It's not playing, and I'm going to play it at the end when I figure it out. Is that fine? But it's the accents video that we have used also for our students to explain. So the previous policy that we had was adopted in 2003, and it's been in place for all these years up until last year. There was an attempt to revise, and there was a draft policy, but I don't really know what happened or why it was abandoned in 2013. Literally, if you go to the the intranet where all of our policies are, you will see it's about 3 paragraphs, so it's not even a full page. That was a 2013 one. So this one that came in comes just after the new policy from DHET was introduced, demanding universities to start working on African official languages so that they can be used as languages of scholarship, of teaching and learning, of innovation, technology, and commerce. So all the universities, 26 higher education institutions in the country, were given that mandate. And because of the size of South Africa and the variation in terms of language of the regions where each language is dominant, Western Cape, in particular UCT, we have isiXhosa, we have English, and we have Afrikaans as our main and official languages. And there have been, people asking why we're doing isiXhosa and not isiZulu. But UKZN is covering that. Free State is covering Sesotho, Univen, and University of Limpopo are looking at Venda and Tsonga and Tsipeti. So each of the universities, including universities of technology, have to do this work of getting our languages in the space of academia, in the space of science, innovation, and technology. So in our own policy, we also recognize that we've got communities that do not speak any of the official languages, but their languages are still constitutionally protected. And that's your people who speak Nu, Khoekhoegowab, and Gaps. Gaps in particular was a big one for the committee because it is spoken by a lot of colored people in Cape Town and in the Western Cape in general. So the policy also is in alignment with the Constitution. We are very happy with that, and that it is aligned with what DHET had also brought out in 2020. So in the policy, we are very much wanting people to start using different tools to promote language, such as translanguaging, which includes code switching. So for example, in my classes, what we do, so translanguaging, what it is that we, as educators and students, look at concepts, academic or scientific concepts, and ask them to think about these in their own languages and to come up with an understanding so that everyone in the class is on the same page. So, for example, in my profession, occupational therapy, a core principle is meaning. We want people to do things that are meaningful so that their health and well-being is improved, or rather we promote meaningful engagement in occupations. So meaning is a core offering in our profession, but meaning is very difficult to explain, even in English. In fact, you've got to go very philosophically to really unpack what it means, right? And so we have asked students, when I did do some teaching in the OT space, what is meaning in your language? So some students, for example, I think it was a Spanish student, she said it was significado. So it's already telling you something of importance, something that is significant. Another Black student, it said for them, meaning is intsingiselo, the essence of something, right? And those are already giving students, for example, an understanding of existential terms as well as philosophical or phenomenological terms, right? Around experience or around the concept itself. So what we are teaching students are very difficult concepts. I also was lucky enough last year to be invited to teach for 2 weeks in sociology. And sociology is quite difficult, even for English speakers. So the part where I had to talk about was around the politics of protest, singing, and marching. And unpacking that was so beautiful because the students could actually, because they had been involved in protest, so they had lived experience of what we're talking about, and then could come up with terms that were useful to explain how this connects to their learning outcomes and how it would better the other requirements of the course, like the assessments. So that's translanguaging. We also note that there is, yes.
But these big sexuality classes?
Yes. No. I was lecturing 1,000 students, 1,150.
You managed to get into the
No. So they divide just like we do here. Two. So I taught in 2 sessions at 11 and 2 p.m. But what we did is you use Mentimeter, and so you ask people to, like, what do you understand by this word, and then you just ask just a dynamic informal class discussion about those things. So that's how we did it. And then in the tutorials themselves that they ran, I had pre-populated questions that tutors had to go ask students. Yeah, so that's how I did it. Then the other thing is, so translanguaging is moving between different languages to explain a phenomenon that everyone in that context will understand. Whereas multilingualism, slightly different but also useful, is when people have more than one language to rely on and to use in their understanding and their communication. So this is something that we also, particularly in health sciences, should be doing, given that a lot of what we do is in partnership with communities and facilities and centers across the city and beyond. For example, our students do all of their clinical blocks in communities, regions, areas where it is not English that is the dominant language. And yet we teach them in English, we assess them in English. We want them to reason clinically in English, but that's not always the case, all right, in terms of reasoning. And then we ourselves, when we're doing our research, like if you think about epidemiology, everything is done in communities where English is not the dominant language. And so if you imagine when people are doing surveys and the survey is entirely in English, some things get lost, whether we like it or not. So that's why then we really were determined to get the policy in, because it took quite a few iterations. Now there are core provisions in the policy, one around teaching and learning. So in the new policy, we encourage the use of teaching the use of isiXhosa in teaching and learning and even assessment, as well as using translanguaging to get to this point, because we understand that not all people speak isiXhosa, and even those people who are actually considered Xhosa might not be fluent in isiXhosa themselves. So translanguaging then becomes a tool, and remembering that also students are involved in the translanguaging. So you as an educator do not have to know everything in the language. As long as you know your discipline, we ask students to also fill in those gaps. And I think it would be even more fascinating for those that are in postgraduate spaces, because those people have lived experience. They most probably have written a thesis by then, so would be able to synthesize knowledge at a more sophisticated level than undergraduate students. Now, undergraduate students are also encouraged to take an introductory course in isiXhosa, so that they can use isiXhosa to communicate throughout. So in our first iteration of the policy, we had said it must be a requirement that all programs or degrees, qualifications at UCT have an isiXhosa course, but then the word required was problematic in that it was more instructive rather than helping people to actually want to do it themselves, and two, the money involved in getting all courses to be to have isiXhosa in the credit system. So it just became too convoluted. So now the current wording is encouraged. So if you have MPH courses, might be good to also have some lessons in isiXhosa, particularly given that data collection might happen in isiXhosa. And then the other aspiration is that we want to get to a point where PhD abstracts are translated into the official languages of the university, in particular isiXhosa and Afrikaans. And this would be supported by the language unit, which is yet to be established, but at this point it is MEP, the Multilingual Education Project, that is supporting that work. Then the core provisions around research and scholarship. Now, when people hear about the language policy, I think, and what I've heard from corridors, is that they think we're saying everything must be in all languages except English and Afrikaans or something like that. But language is not just me speaking particular words that have a meaning for one group. There is something called meta language. So thinking about language and there's many things around it. So we want people to conduct their research in indigenous languages where possible, or on indigenous languages themselves. For example, in my earlier remarks, I made a statement that isiXhosa is a rheomodic language. In other words, it emphasizes processes and relationships and so it uses verbs a lot, rather than English, which is a noun denominated language. For example, we speak about intellectualization, concretization, abstraction. Those are all nouns, but we know what they mean and we're quick to understand. Whereas in English, in isiXhosa, I'd have to actually spend a lot of time explaining each one, and that is also an interesting thing that I think we should look at. Whereas when we speak English and we want to speak faster, it's about efficiency, chasing time and being, the words left me literally. But whereas if we think about some of the things, our issues, but we really think and conceptualize them in our languages here, they offer us depth rather than wanting to just chase speed and efficiency. It could be about what are the layers. For example, impilo. That's the second term I want to talk to you about. Impilo is a direct translation of health, right? And we know health has been described or defined by the World Health Organization as a state of not just physical, mental, you remember that definition, right? In isiXhosa, impilo is far more broader than that. When I say impilo, I'm invoking notions of livelihood, life itself, living together or living with others, health and well-being, all at the same time, all at once. So those are some of the things that we are missing when we don't do research onto languages themselves. And then the other thing is that we also want to develop discipline-specific language. I was lucky enough to be invited by Umhlobo Wenene, which is one of the SABC radio stations. They have a very large reach, actually, in the country, about 5.5 million listeners daily. So I was asked in this show to speak about occupational therapy, and it's a closer radio. Now, occupational therapy was founded in the UK, in America, and it spread to the UK, Australia, and then it landed in South Africa around the 1940s. And it was only available to Black people only after 1994 in terms of being service users. But the first OT to a Black OT to graduate in South Africa was in the late 80s. So we don't have isiXhosa explaining some of the phenomena that we are interested in my discipline. And so this policy is supporting that work and saying we should start naming things, identifying phenomena, right? And languaging it with our own tongues. And it's also about looking at not just language in terms of research, but researching about how to use language when we're teaching. So multilingual pedagogies, right? So it's there's a lot of things that we are thinking people can cover. And in the language policy committee, we have a lot of linguists. So they really did help expand on some of these. And we also recognize that we are living in the fourth industrial revolution. Or I'm not sure if we're still in the fourth, maybe in the fifth now. Because things are moving fast. I mean, if you use Microsoft Copilot, as I do, you know it actually speaks Xhosa and Zulu and Sotho these days. Venda is a little, it's trying, but you can actually just speak English and ask it to reply in isiXhosa, and it does it, and it even gets the pronunciation sometimes like pretty good, you know. So it's we're living in that world, and so the language policy also is in support of using technological tools, software, to develop our intentions further. Then the third provision is around communications. We received VC desks about the language policy completely in English. The VC himself is not a native language speaker of English. So it was quite interesting. He was like, oh, yes, UCT is embarking on this. This is now the official languages. And then he only uses one official language to communicate to everyone. And the issue is that since 2016, UCT stopped outsourcing, and we insourced so many people who actually don't speak English, even in their day-to-day at work. I'm talking about people who are security guards, who actually need to read communication about university events and how to respond to that. I'm talking about cleaners, residences in our office spaces, and all other support staff who are usually on a lower pay class and don't actually use English in their day-to-day. For example, if you think about the emails that we receive about who has passed away, they are always on in English, and it's like, why? When we have the tools these days, literally it would take maybe 30 minutes for a translator to even input it on Google Translate these days, and just check for spelling and grammatical errors and release it. So we are hoping we'll get to that point where at least we have formal communications in different languages. And this is not an outlier. There are many institutions, in particular in the US, of all places, where universities use both English and Spanish and other Latin languages when they communicate with their university communities. It's something that happens in Canada, where they use French and English when they're communicating. In fact, even the prime ministers in that part of the world, in their social media, it's always two posts, one in English, one in French. In South Africa, our own president doesn't even use his own language when he talks to us. And so, you know, we're still a far way off, but we really do hope that we'll get to a point where this is a norm, because also it helps in the development of us who are the readers or consumers, and in terms to be more normalized, new terms, because language also develops as fast as we do. And then we have language plans, and these are devolved into faculties. So each faculty has to come up with plans on how to implement the language policy. And we have had a few things happening in health sciences, but I'm embarrassed to say that they haven't been thoroughly coordinated in the way that the policy envisaged that they should be. And many of them actually predate the adoption of the policy. For example, I just finished a survey on how many people speak African languages on our campus. I've been doing a lot of symposia about 2 years ago about how to reflecting on teaching using English and Xhosa in class, or language discordance between health practitioners and their patients, where sometimes miscommunications can lead to misdiagnosis or mismanagement. We also have had some people like Professor Sipho Dlamini and Frank Cronenberg released an article a couple of months ago saying why we should change the way we speak about infectious diseases, where they are not just looking now at language at its granular dimension, but rather more meta language. So they are arguing that infectious diseases uses battle language, colonial language. So they talk about invasions, colonization in the context of infectious disease, right? Or resistance. And these are three key terms in infectious diseases. But what do they mean in everyday life, particularly when you're talking to a patient and then you say, no, it's nothing serious. It's just a bacterial invasion. Now say that in Xhosa. Or to somebody who is a descendant of people who were oppressed and colonized. And now you say, no, it's just a colonizer that you have, nothing serious, you know? In fact, that's one of the things in that article. So we do have some plans, but they aren't quite formulated yet. And one of them was to have more people, because for the past 2-3 years, I've been the sole FHS representative on language matters. And it's a lot of responsibility considering how central language is in everything that we do. And so I'm happy to announce Dr. Natasha Muna is an alternative rep, as well as Ms. Nomusa Ntinga. They respectively from the Department of Health Sciences Education and Department of Health and Rehab Sciences, who will also be helping with some of the thinking around implementing languages. We have a framework that we've also worked on how to teach in isiXhosa and Afrikaans here on campus, because we already have those courses. So some of the work is happening, but it's always about the money in the end. So we're also, if there are people who have research listening and would like to have some collaborations or brainstorming around how to, improve our language accessibility, that would be really nice, and I'd be happy to talk to those people and any of us in the Language Policy Committee. Then the last provision is around roles. So I'm part of the Language Policy Committee as the Dean's representative, and we meet quite regularly. I'd say almost once every month or twice sometimes, because it's just been a lot of work, and I was a key member in the task team that developed this current policy. And we are hoping that in the near future, there will be a language unit that will support translating, particularly those abstracts, into official languages. They've already done some of the work through MEP. So in my course outline is available in all the languages at UCT now. And I hope other courses take that up as well. And it's also the center where they provide free courses for staff members who want to learn how to communicate in isiXhosa, so basic communication. They offer that, and they can also offer it as a package for a department or a division rather than a general one, so that maybe we look at terms and phrases that are unique to our context. So they are doing that. And I think that's everything I needed to say. Lastly, monitoring is the committee's purview. So they'll be doing that. But they do ask that for queries and concerns, particularly on implementing the language policy, this must first be directed, if you're a staff member, to your faculty structures, for students through the DSA, and if and where necessary, to include the Office of Inclusivity and Change. And that is the language policy we have. So it's a very short document, it's about 3-4 pages maybe. In fact, the first page is just a glossary. So it's please, I would like people to go through it by themselves. Maybe it might spark ideas for your own research and your own teaching in your space. You can find it on the university website. If you just type on Google UCT Language Policy 2024, you will find it there. Or in the homepage at UCT, you go under policies and go to language, it will be listed there. Thank you very much for your ears. Any questions?
I don't have a question. I mean, I do have some questions, but I think this was so wonderful. I've heard it before. It's really like very good hearing it. So it struck me the thing about neural pathways, you know, like we think about the brain is forming as a child and into early adulthood. And I always used to think that I fell off my bicycle because I never learned to cycle as a child, and that's why my neural pathways were developed. What you're saying is actually does continue in adulthood at a cognitive level. And I think we never ever really considered that. You know, there are a lot of things. So I think we use a symbolic function of language. And this Nigel uses quite about terms. He's not using it in the sense of speaking language, but he's flagging it for people to say, oh, what's he saying? Why is he saying?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So I think there's also that function. Right? So even if, and I think translating our curricula, it's like a low-hanging fruit, the course outline.
Yeah.
So, especially with that.
Exactly. So if I may piggyback on that, health sciences actually has a very, very good rep across the university in terms of language matters, even though we don't house the School of Languages and Literature. But we're doing very well according to the executive and the language policy committee. And that's also really to acknowledge Lionel's role in that, in what he does. And Karen, in the last report in faculty board, also said they're now going to be introducing the oath, the faculty oath, in the university languages, so that students, when they graduate, can say it in a language meaningful to them. So that's, I think, very exciting. And to speak about that thing about the significant or what symbolic use of language or ceremonial use of language, I think is good. And I think it's about that translanguaging or multilingualism offering that the policy is supporting. Yeah.
This was a really nice summary, and I think that just demystified a lot of issues around language policy. And I mean, some very important work that definitely needs to be done and implemented. And I'm trying to picture how all this is going to be operationalized, right? So I'm going to come back to what you mentioned earlier about, an example, using translingualism in the classrooms. So and the the teacher or lecturer or facilitator doesn't necessarily have to be fluent in a particular language. It will rely on other students in the classroom to be able to translate. Is that?
Yes, yes.
Okay? Makes sense. When it comes to assessments in different languages, how would that work?
Yes. So, number one, I'm just saying this as a disclaimer. I am not omniscient. I'm not God. So I have let the burden of knowing everything, which is a fictional of, but I will try to my best to explain to you. So oral oral examinations are, I suppose, a very low hanging fruit. We've got a significant number of people who actually speak these languages on our campus, in particular postgraduate students that can be brought in, right? In terms of tutoring ad hoc or, and what we would need to do is to code everything that could be possibly said by a student, like a memo, right? And as long as what the student is saying is meaningful, or rather the meaning remains the same across languages and and it's recorded, I think that could be one. I recently had a meeting with the vice chancellor, and he said he's looking for, hasn't found it, some AI tools that could do live translation as we speak, like how in Parliament or the UN, people speak very different languages. And for example, I forgot the Chinese guy, Xi Jinping. He never speaks English, but he's always in multilateral meetings, and so there's interpreters there, human interpreters. So he will say maybe we should start leveraging technology to get to that point where even in the classroom, we can use that, one. And so oral exams. Two, written exams, I don't know, I think maybe we would start small, like short answer MCQ questions. I think essays would be quite tricky, but this work has already been done in Upper Campus through Professor Madiba's work. He just left UCT a couple of years ago, but there's a database where they used to ask students to write an essay about their lived experience of coming to UCT, and they would write it in isiXhosa or whatever, or Sesotho. And then they had tutors who, the entire team, they spoke in all the South African languages, and then started doing the translating and put them in this database for that kind of work that has happened. But I remember him and Kathy, you remember that? Forgotten her surname. Starts with L. She's in School of Education professor there. Look at. Yeah, I think so. Both of them were in that, and they said the only issue was money. Yeah, right. But I think the other thing is that we have to be intentional in our hiring processes, right? Where in a team, at least there must be representativity in terms of language, right? So that when students also come to us, I mean, like if a student came with deep Afrikaans, I wouldn't know what to do. I would have to go look for somebody who also speaks it. So it'd be good that even in our hiring practices, we start putting language there as something, advantageous more than a requirement, and eventually a requirement. And by the time that our students graduate, they should be we should be able to employ them, and they should be able to say that they actually did isiXhosa or Afrikaans at a university and can be able to hold a conversation in it. I don't know about other forms of assessment, but there has been talks about theses written in isiXhosa. The issue there is that we don't have enough people for disciplines to review and mark them. But UKZN is doing that work, but usually it is in the context of linguistics, and not, for example, a PhD in public health, but written exclusively in isiXhosa. We have not yet gotten there, but this is something that is possible. Professor Kwesi Pra from UWC usually reminds us that Afrikaans took 200 years only to be at the pinnacle of development now, in such that you can do a PhD in any subject in Afrikaans, but it was institutions that were used to prop it up. He also picks up on Hebrew. That Hebrew before the state of Israel, although it was there, it wasn't as codified as it is now, in that now they have very advanced technologies entirely in Hebrew script. And there's a third language in Indonesia, where it was a Dutch colony, and then when they gained independence, is it Indonesia or Malaysia? I think Malaysia, and then they went straight to Malagasy, and it's been only 50 years, and now everything's completely like that. So it's not that it's not possible. It's political will, determination, and resourcefulness. In our context, I'm not advocating that we get rid of English, or the policy is not even saying that. We're saying we want all of our people to be respected in terms of that right to receive higher education in a language of their choice. Very long answer.
It's going to be different for different people, right? So see it look about for example, that she does reflective exercises and all of that, and the nuances, the differences between different languages, you know, and so how is, humanities, for example, manage that? Me, in my context, in terms of third year short answer questions, I'm envisioning students write it online, which is the way we're going anyway, but then a really good translation, and that's the thing, I don't know how accurate the translation services, online translation services are in terms of ChatGPT, Google Translate, all of that, because you can't have students being disadvantaged in terms of, so it's advantage in terms of, yes, you can learn in your own language, but then you maybe mark down because it can't be.
No. So maybe I think let's reverse engineer that a little bit and say, for example, in an MCQ question, you say, what is the term that explains this phenomenon, right? And then an English student says it's vertical asymmetry. Just for argument's sake, a closest student says kungadlingani kwezinto. So now it means the marker must know the different ways in which this phenomenon can be explained. So in other words, the student who speaks English only, the student who speaks English and isiXhosa are both privileged in. So it could be also in the way that we ask questions, or also saying, in reference to a lecture that we had on human rights, for example, can you detail or discuss the nuances of different languages in enriching this phenomenon, right? So it's in how we ask those that I think can be useful, rather than saying, Indaba, what does this mean? And then you're like, that's not my everyday language, Yeah. James and then I'm not sure who actually started.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So the students that are in our list, the one thing that we've not looked at is the fact that the Eastern Cape is piloting a project whereby students can use translanguaging in maths and physics, and I don't know which other subjects when they write their end of year exams. So that is in place.
Okay.
So if one then is looking at a developmental approach, it would be to look at the experiences of those students, and also looking at how they transition into our space, and what benefits are they, if they have acquired that knowledge. So that would be one example. The other one is around, using, so if you look at Vision 2030, an aspect of that is about using a humanizing praxis. And so if we're looking at trans-languaging, it would be that we accept that students are co-constructed knowledge and facilitate, that in our classroom spaces. Of course, we have the constraints, so in lectures for 5 minutes, don't have much more. So there would have to be adaptations. I wanted to speak about a concern. So we speak about the language and how we advance that, but we're not looking at our culture. And what we may find is that, yes, we will advance, the adoption of other languages or other indigenous languages, but the culture remains the same, which means that we continue to undermine the efforts, of the language policy. So, is there a plan, to address that?
So, the Language Policy Committee is strictly on language matters, but I do take your point that language is inextricable from culture. And I think, in fact, some people have said language is the vehicle of culture. So I think the answer to that would be a step-by-step approach or a linear progression. So we start with low-hanging fruits first. So where we start, for example, becoming a multilingual context or society, which then would give rise to different cultures finding full expression here. But institutional culture as a focus is in the purview of the DVC transformation, not in our committee per se. So I can't completely answer it. But I'm very interested in what you said about the Eastern Cape model. I didn't know about it, and I'm sure the Language Policy Committee would also like to know particularly the findings, and so that we can start working in alignment with that, because those students will be coming to us eventually. Thanks for that, James.
I'll chat to you separately now over time.
All right.
If you've got a few minutes.
No, I have.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks very much.
All right. Thank you so much, Carmen.
Thank you, Siwe, for presenting, and thank you very much to everyone who attended. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.